The parking garage was almost deserted. Somewhere above, a fluorescent tube buzzed and flickered like it couldn't decide whether to live or die. Tochi's lungs burned as she ran, her boots slapping against the cold concrete, echoing off every pillar and wall, until it sounded like an army chasing her instead of just one man. Marcus never ran. That was the terrifying thing about him. He walked with the calm of someone who already knew how every story ended, and he was always right. The hospital entrance was visible through the glass doors at the far end, but far might as well have been a different country. The parked cars around her were dark and locked and useless. There was no one, nobody except a man standing beneath the one working light near a black car, his hands loose at his sides, his face turned slightly away like he was thinking about something distant and private. Tochi didn't reason through it. She simply moved. She crossed the distance between them in seconds and threw her arms around his torso, pressing her face hard against his chest, gripping the back of his coat like it was the edge of a cliff. He went completely still. She could feel every muscle in his body go rigid with the controlled tension of someone who was very good at not reacting. He didn't know her. She was a stranger wrapped around him in an empty parking garage, and he simply stood there and let it happen. She tilted her head up and found his eyes, dark, unreadable, set in a face that could have been carved from something expensive. Strong jaw, smooth skin, black hair that swept back from his forehead with the kind of effortlessness that wasn't accidental. He looked down at her without a single word. Tochi's voice came out barely a breath. "Please, just pretend you know me." His eyes narrowed, but only slightly. He didn't move away. "Tochi." Marcus's voice arrived before his footsteps did, that familiar sound of unhurried ownership. She pressed herself closer to the stranger, her fingers curled tighter into the fabric of his coat. The stranger's hand lifted slowly, like he was approaching something that might startle. His fingers settled against her waist with barely any weight at all, barely a question. She answered it by pressing closer. His hand settled more firmly then, warm and steady through the thin fabric of her blouse. "You know this woman?" The stranger's voice was quiet. His Korean accent shaped the English words into something smoother than they deserved to be. Tochi shook her head quickly against his chest. "No." Marcus's footsteps stopped right behind her. "Baby?" His voice had dropped into that register she'd learned to fear, soft the way a blade is soft before it cuts. "You're embarrassing yourself. Let's go home." The stranger's other hand came up gradually and touched her chin, tilting her face toward his. He looked at her for a long moment. She didn't know what he was searching for. Whatever he found, his expression shifted by one fraction of a degree, barely visible, but there. He looked past her at Marcus. "She says no. She doesn't know you." Marcus made a sound halfway between a laugh and a threat. "You need to step away from her, right now." "She's the one holding on to me." The stranger said it the way someone might mention the weather. "I don't think she wants to go with you." Tochi could hear the change in Marcus's breathing. She knew that rhythm by heart, the way it shortened before everything got bad. She glanced back just far enough to see his jaw locked tight, his hands fisted at his sides, his eyes doing that calculating thing they did when he was deciding how to make someone hurt without being seen doing it. "You have no idea what you're walking into." Marcus stepped forward. "Walk away now." The stranger didn't move. His hands on her waist stayed exactly where they were, warm, steady, unhurried. "No." Just that. One syllable. Nothing added, nothing taken away. Marcus's face darkened. "Do you know who I am? I'm an attorney. I have people. You will regret tonight." The stranger tilted his head to one side, just slightly. The gesture made him look curious rather than threatened. "Is that a threat?" "I'm telling you to let go of what's mine." Two men materialized from somewhere in the shadows near the adjacent cars. Tochi hadn't seen them arrive. Both Korean, both in dark suits, both watching the stranger with the patient stillness of people waiting for a signal. The stranger didn't look at them. He kept his eyes on Marcus. "You should leave now." Marcus laughed, but it was hollow. "You think I'm gonna walk away from my own girlfriend because of you and your little security detail?" "Tochi," his voice changed, came at her directly now. "I'm gonna give you one chance. Come here, or I promise you, you won't like what comes next." The stranger's fingers pressed more firmly against her side, just 1 degree of added pressure. "She's not going anywhere with you." "This is kidnapping." Call it whatever you want. The stranger's voice stayed completely even. Call the police while you're at it. Tell them you were chasing a woman through a parking garage at midnight. Tell them she ran from you. Tell them she grabbed the first stranger she found because she was afraid of you. Marcus went very quiet. That particular silence was the most dangerous one in his repertoire. Tochi, tell him you're coming home.
Tochi's throat locked. The words wouldn't come out in the direction Marcus wanted them to go. The stranger seemed to sense it, the way she seized up. His thumb brushed slowly against the base of her spine. Easy, just a small thing, just enough. Breathe, he said, very quietly, just for her, like Marcus had evaporated. She pulled in a shaky breath. It hurt going down. One of the men in suits stepped forward, placing himself between Marcus and the stranger without a word. Marcus stopped. His eyes moved between them, recalibrating. This isn't finished, his voice had gone flat. You hear me, Tochi? You think you can just leave? You have nothing. You have no green card, no savings, no job he didn't approve. Nothing. She already made her choice. The stranger's thumb kept its slow, steady movement. Leave. Don't come back. Marcus looked at the stranger for a long moment. Something passed between them that Tochi couldn't fully read. Some silent exchange of information about the kind of men they each were. Then he looked at Tochi one final time. You'll regret this. He turned and walked away. His footsteps faded across the concrete. Tochi watched until she couldn't hear them anymore. Then her knees nearly gave out. The adrenaline left her body all at once, and she started to shake from somewhere deep inside, a trembling that had nothing to do with the cold. The stranger's arms came around her properly then, both of them, full and certain. He pulled her against his chest and held her there without a word. She could hear his heartbeat, slow, steady, completely unaffected, as if every night ended like this for him. He's gone, he said. Tochi nodded against his coat. She knew she should step back. She knew she should thank him, introduce herself, try to look like a person who had some kind of plan. But she couldn't make herself move. She just stayed there, held by someone she didn't know, while two men in suits stood silently nearby and the parking garage hummed around them. Eventually, she pulled back enough to look up at him. Thank you. He studied her face. His eyes moved across her features with a focused attention that should have felt invasive. It didn't. Are you hurt? No. Did he hurt you before tonight? Is that why you were running? Tochi swallowed. She didn't want to walk back through the last 2 years in a parking garage at midnight. She didn't want to talk about the fingerprint bruises that had finally faded, the ones that hadn't, the slow, quiet way a person can disappear inside a relationship until they look in the mirror and don't recognize the woman looking back. The stranger seemed to understand the silence. He nodded once. Do you have somewhere safe to go? That was the question, wasn't it? Tochi looked down at the ground. Family? Friends? She shook her head slightly. Her family was in Nigeria. Her friends had slowly all become Marcus's friends first. The apartment was Marcus's. Her immigration status was tied to the graduate program she'd been quietly pressured into leaving 6 months ago because Marcus said she was more focused on school than on him. She had nothing. Marcus had made very sure of that. The stranger spoke briefly in Korean to the two men. They both nodded and moved off toward a separate car. Then he looked back at her. What's your name? Tochi. Tochi. He said it carefully, giving every syllable its proper weight. I'm Son-Yan. She realized she was still gripping the front of his coat. She made herself release it. Her hands felt cold immediately, like they'd forgotten what to do without something to hold. Son-Yan removed his coat and settled it around her shoulders without asking. It was warm from his body. It smelled like cedar wood and expensive things, and something underneath that she couldn't identify. Get in the car, Son-Yan said. Tochi looked at the black sedan, then at him. I don't know you. No? You could be dangerous. Yes. At least he was honest about it. Tochi pulled his coat tighter around herself. Why did you help me? Son-Yan was quiet for a moment. His expression gave up nothing. You asked me to. That was all. No performance, no explanation, no version of himself dressed up to look heroic. She'd asked, and he'd answered. Tochi made a decision. She got in the car. Son-Yan walked around and took the driver's seat. He started the engine but didn't move. He looked across at her. Where was he taking you? His home? Is your name on the lease? No. Do you have things there you need? Tochi thought about her clothes, her laptop, her research notebooks, the small gold necklace her mother had pressed into her hand at the airport the morning she left Lagos. Yes. Sonyeon pulled his phone and typed something quickly. Give me the address. She did. He sent the message, pocketed the phone, and pulled out of the parking space. Where are we going? Tochi asked. Somewhere safe. It wasn't really an answer. Tochi was too hollowed out to push for a better one. She leaned her head against the window and watched Seoul slide past in rivers of light. She'd loved this city when she arrived 3 years ago. She'd stepped off that plane with 2 suitcases and a full scholarship and a feeling like she was finally going somewhere, like everything she had worked for was beginning to pay off. She'd met Marcus at an orientation dinner for international students. He was American, 6 years in Korea, spoke the language, knew the neighborhoods, moved through the city like someone who owned a piece of every room he entered. He'd made her feel like she'd found her footing in a place that had felt tilted. She hadn't noticed the tilting starting again until it was already everywhere. She didn't know the exact moment it changed, when he started going through her phone while she slept, when the circle of people she was allowed to spend time with quietly shrank to almost nothing, when moving into his apartment felt like safety, and then gradually like a door that only locked from the outside, when missing one class became dropping the semester, when the first time he grabbed her hard enough to leave a mark became the second time, and then the third, and then something she simply lived inside of, waiting for it to be over. If you're watching this from somewhere safe tonight, drop a comment and let me know where you're tuning in from. If Tochi's story is sitting heavy on your chest, the way I think it is, hit that like button. And if you know someone who needs to hear that running toward a stranger is sometimes the bravest thing a person can do, share this right now. The car stopped. Tochi blinked and found herself in an underground parking structure, clean and cathedral quiet, the kind where each numbered space probably cost more than 3 months of her scholarship stipend. Sonyeon came around and opened her door. She stepped out and followed him to an elevator lined with dark mirror panels. She caught her reflection and barely knew the woman looking back. Hair pulled apart by a night of running, eyes wide and glassy. The elegant twist she'd pinned up that morning had come completely undone. The elevator opened directly into an apartment. No hallway, no lobby, just straight into a vast open space with floor-to-ceiling windows and Seoul glittering below like something poured out across the dark. Sonyeon went to the kitchen and filled a glass with water. He brought it to her. Drink. She did. It helped. He watched her finish it. Then he said, there are 3 bedrooms. Choose whichever feels right. The bathroom has everything you need. Your things will be here tomorrow morning. Tochi set down the glass. I can't stay here. Why not? Because I don't know you.
Because this is not a normal situation. Because she stopped. Because she had nowhere else to go and she knew it and he probably knew it too. And she had no idea what that meant. Sion took the empty glass from her and set it on the counter. You're exhausted and frightened. You don't need to decide anything tonight. Just sleep. Tomorrow we work out what comes next. Who are you? Tochi asked. Really? Someone who can make sure you're safe. That's not an answer. His mouth moved, almost a smile. Almost. No, it isn't. He showed her to a bedroom. It was larger than the apartment she'd shared with Marcus. The bed was wide and white and looked like falling into a cloud. There were clean towels in the ensuite. Sion told her she could lock the door if it helped her. Then he left. She did lock it. Then she sat at the foot of the bed with her hands over her face. She didn't cry. She had stopped crying somewhere around the 8-month mark because it costs more than it gave back, and Marcus didn't like the noise. She showered instead. The water was hot, and she let it run until it softened all the locked-up places in her shoulders and neck. She stayed until her skin felt like her own again. When she stepped out, she realized she had nothing to change into. She wrapped herself in a towel and cracked the bedroom door. A folded pile of clothes sat on the floor outside. Sweatpants, a t-shirt, both enormous, both clean and soft. She took them, changed, climbed into the bed and let the weight of the blanket press down on her like a hand on her back. The sheets were smooth and cool. The pillow was perfect. She thought she would lie awake for hours, turning everything over. Instead, she was asleep in minutes. for the first time in longer than she could properly remember, without bracing herself for what morning would bring. She woke to sunlight she had forgotten to block, and spent one full, disoriented second not knowing where she was. Then it came back in a sweep. The parking garage, Marcus walking away, Sian's coat around her shoulders. Tochi sat up. There were sounds from deeper in the apartment. She followed them to the kitchen. Sian was already dressed. Dark trousers, white shirt, sleeves folded to the elbow. His hair was perfect. He looked up. "Coffee?" "Yes, please." He poured a cup and slid it across the counter without ceremony. "Your things are in the second bedroom," he said. "My people collected them an hour ago." Tochi stared at him. How did they get inside the apartment? Does it matter? It should have. She found she couldn't make it matter. She was just relieved. Her mother's necklace, her passport, the notebooks. "Thank you," she said. Sian nodded. He didn't drink anything himself. He just stood and watched her with those unreadable dark eyes. "I need to figure out what to do," Tochi said. "I can't stay here indefinitely." "Why not?" "Because this isn't my life. You're a stranger who did something generous once. I'm grateful, but I can't just move into your home. You need to be somewhere safe. This is safe. You don't know me." "I know enough." Tochi set down the coffee. "What exactly do you know?" Sian was quiet for several seconds. Then he said, "I know you ran from someone who was hurting you. I know you have no one to call. And I know you're stronger than you understand, because a person who was truly broken wouldn't still be standing here asking hard questions. They'd be collapsed." His words pressed against something tender in her chest. Tochi looked away. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing. People don't do things like this for nothing. Some people do." Tochi laughed. It came out sharper than she intended. "That hasn't been my experience." Sian stepped around the counter. He stopped a careful distance away, not crowding her, just closer. "I'm not going to hurt you, Tochi. I'm not going to touch you without permission. I'm not keeping you here against your will. The door is right there. You can walk through it whenever you choose. But as long as you stay, you're safe. That's all I want for you." She wanted to believe him so completely it frightened her. Trust was a thing she had learned to be careful with, because she had given it freely and watched it get used against her like a tool. "Why?" she asked quietly. "Why do you care?" Sian looked at her for a long moment. "I don't know yet." At least, that was honest. Tochi spent the day settling into the second bedroom. Everything had been brought, even things she hadn't thought to list. A photograph of her family taken outside their compound in Enugu. The Ankara print scarf her mother had tucked into her bag before she left. The novel Marcus had told her made her seem pretentious for reading. Sian left in the afternoon. "Order food if you're hungry," he said. "Don't open the door for anyone." Then he was gone. Tochi explored the apartment. Beautiful, spare, and almost entirely without personality. No photographs, no trinkets, nothing that told a story about who lived here. The only exception was the study. One wall of shelves, mostly Korean titles, some English ones. Business, history, strategy, a few works of philosophy she recognized from her undergraduate years back at Nisuka. She was reading the spines when her phone rang. Marcus. She stared at his name until the call ended. It started again immediately, and again. On the fourth attempt, she picked up. "Stop calling me," she said. "Tochi, baby, just listen." His voice was the soft one, the apologetic one, the one that had worked on her for so long. "I overreacted last night. I was worried. I love you. You scared me when you ran like that." "I'm not coming back, Marcus." "Where are you staying? Who is that man? Are you with him?" And there it was, punctual as ever. The real question underneath all the others, not whether she was safe, not whether she was okay, just whether she belonged to him or given his property away to someone else. That is not your business anymore. "Everything about you is my business. You're mine, Tochi. You don't get to decide to leave." "I already did." "You have nothing without me. No visa, no money, no support system. You think some Korean man is going to take care of you? He'll use you up and move on. Goodbye, Marcus. If you hang up, I will find you. I will make certain you are deported. I will burn every connection you have in this city. I will make sure you never build anything here or anywhere. I ended the call and blocked the number. Her hands were shaking so badly she dropped the phone and had to pick it up from the floor. The apartment door opened. Sihan walked in carrying paper bags that smelled extraordinary. He took one look at her face and set the bags on the counter. What happened? Marcus called. What did he say? Tochi shook her head. She didn't want to reconstruct it word by word. Sihan crossed to her and gently lifted the phone from her hands. He looked at the blocked contact. Something in his face went somewhere very cold. You threatened him. Not a question. Tochi nodded. Sihan set her phone on the counter and pulled out his own. He spoke in Korean, quiet and clipped and entirely controlled. When he hung up, he looked at her. He won't contact you anymore. You can't promise that. Yes, I can. There was something in the way he said it, something that didn't ask to be believed. It simply was. What do you want to do? Help him understand the full weight of what it would cost him to continue. Sihan, I don't want you getting into trouble because of me. He moved a step closer. His hand lifted slowly, and he touched her cheek with the tips of his fingers. Just that. The touch was so gentle it made her eyes fill. Let me handle it. They ate dinner together that night. Sihan had brought Korean food, and he walked her through it without condescension. What paired with what? How to wrap the meat in the lettuce leaves? Which sauces to balance against each other? He didn't circle back to Marcus. Instead, he asked about Nigeria, about her family, about what she missed most about home. Tochi found herself actually talking, really talking, the kind she had almost forgotten she was capable of. She told him about her mother who ran a tailoring business from their front room and could argue down any fabric seller in Enugu with a smile on her face. About her father, who taught mathematics at the university and insisted on quoting Chinua Achebe at the dinner table. About her younger sister, who was 17 and determined to become a surgeon and who sent Tochi voice notes that lasted 11 minutes each.
Seon listened. He didn't check his phone. He didn't redirect the conversation back to himself. He just listened with the full weight of his attention, like there was nowhere else the evening could possibly be going. When Tochi finally caught herself and apologized for talking too much, Seon shook his head. You haven't been talking enough, he said. You've been quiet for too long. The words landed somewhere deep. She could feel the accuracy of them pressing on something she hadn't named yet. You tell me something now, she said. Only fair. What do you want to know? Anything. I'm living in your apartment and I still don't really know who you are. Seon's expression shifted fractionally. Business, imports and exports, investments, a variety of other interests. That's vague enough to be decorative. His mouth curved, almost. Some of it is legal. Is it dangerous? Yes. To me? No. How do I trust that? You can't, he said simply. Trust isn't something I'm able to hand you. You have to arrive at it yourself. They looked at each other across the remains of their dinner. Tochi tried to see past the surface of him, past the careful stillness, past the face that offered nothing away without permission. She caught glimpses, brief windows into something warmer, but mostly he was closed in a way that should have felt like a warning. I should probably be more frightened of you than I am, she said. Yes, but you're not. I know. Why is that? Seon rose and began clearing the plates. Because you know the difference between a person who wants to harm you and a person who wants to protect you. You've spent 2 years with the first kind. You're just now learning what the second kind feels like. Tochi got up and helped him. They moved around the kitchen quietly, without friction, without the constant low hum of tension she'd forgotten wasn't a natural feature of shared spaces. That night, she lay in her bedroom thinking about trust, about what it felt like to be touched carefully. Marcus had touched her like she was something he'd paid for. Seon touched her like he was asking a question every single time, like her answer genuinely mattered. She fell asleep still thinking about it and slept straight through until morning. A week passed, then a second. Marcus didn't call again. Her phone went quiet except for her family's messages and her sister's long, rambling voice notes. Seon came and went. He gave her space without making it feel like absence. When he was home, he was simply present, reading in the study, eating what she cooked without making a production of it, existing in the same rooms without filling them with pressure. Tochi started going outside during the day. She walked the neighborhood, she found a small cafe and sat by the window with a book. She remembered what it felt like to move through the world without calculating every step. She also started noticing the men who appeared sometimes at a distance when she was out. Dark suits, careful eyes, always positioned where they could see her without being obviously visible. She knew they were Seon's people. It should have felt like surveillance. It felt like being held. One afternoon, she came home to find Seon in the living room with several other men, all of them speaking in low, urgent Korean. They stopped when she walked in. The men bowed slightly and excused themselves. Seon stood up. "Sorry," Tochi said. "I didn't mean to interrupt." "You didn't," he said. "How was your day?" "Good. I went to the university library, started looking at which programs I might apply to. I want to finish what I started." Something moved across Seon's face. "You want to go back to school?" "I do. I need to sort out my visa situation first, but yes, I want to finish. I can help with that." Tochi shook her head. "You've already done too much. I haven't done anything except give you a safe place to stay. That's not a small thing, Seon." He stepped closer. They were very close now. She could see the faint scar near her left eyebrow, the exact shade of brown in his eyes. Could smell his cologne, cedar and something warmer beneath it. "Let me help you," Seon said quietly. "Please." It was the please that broke through everything. This man, who clearly commanded rooms and inspired the kind of quiet deference that had nothing to do with politeness, was saying please to her, was asking. "Okay," Tochi whispered. Seon's hand came up. His thumb traced the line of her cheekbone with the same careful attention he gave everything. "You're beautiful when you almost smile." "I'm not almost smiling." "You are. I can tell." He was right. She could feel it trying to happen. She let it. The smile came, and Seon's eyes went soft in a way she hadn't seen from him before. He leaned down slowly, giving her every opportunity to move away. She didn't move. His lips touched hers gently, so carefully, like he was afraid to get it wrong. Tochi's hands came up to his chest, and she could feel his heart moving fast beneath her palms. This man, who had stood completely unmoved when Marcus threatened him in a parking garage, was nervous about kissing her. She kissed him back and felt something in her chest open up like a window. Seon pulled back first and pressed his forehead against hers. "Tell me if this is too much. Tell me if you want to stop." "I don't want to stop." "Tochi." Her name came out rough. "I need you to be choosing this, not because you feel you owe me, not because you don't feel safe saying no. I'm not afraid to say no to you, Seon. If I wanted to stop, I would tell you. Promise me." "I promise." He kissed her again, deeper this time. His hand stayed on her face, careful and reverent. When they finally pulled apart, Tochi was breathing like she'd been running. Seon looked undone in a way that was entirely new on him. Hair messed from her hands, eyes dark. "I have a meeting," he said. He didn't move, just stood looking at her. Finally, he stepped back. "I'll be late. Don't wait up." "Be safe," Tochi said. Something shifted in his expression, surprise, like the words had landed somewhere unexpected, like he wasn't used to people saying that to him. "I will," he said. Then he left. Tochi stood in the living room for a long time afterward, her lips still warm. She touched her mouth and tried to understand what was happening inside her. She was falling for him, for this stranger who had stepped between her and Marcus without being asked, for this dangerous and careful man who touched her like she was made of something worth protecting, for Seon who asked permission and said please, and listened like what she said was the most important thing in the room. She should have been running. She was done running. That night, Tochi couldn't sleep. She was still awake when she heard the apartment door. Footsteps, a long exhale. She got up and padded to the hallway. Seon was in the kitchen. He looked tired in a way she hadn't seen before. Shirt untucked, hair no longer perfect. There was blood on his knuckles. Tochi's stomach dropped. "You're hurt." Seon looked up. "It's not mine." That should have alarmed her. It didn't. Tochi walked to him and led him to the sink. She washed the dried blood away. His knuckles were bruised but unbroken. "What happened?" "Someone needed to understand something," he said. "Understand what?" Seon looked at her. "That people under my protection are not to be touched or threatened." "Was it Marcus?" Tochi's hands got still. "What did you do?" "Had a conversation. Made the consequences clear. Nothing permanent." "Tochi, he won't come near you again. I made certain of it." She should have pressed harder, should have demanded details, but she was so tired of being afraid, so tired of looking around corners.
If Seon had done something to remove that particular shadow from her life, she couldn't make herself be angry about it. She dried his hands carefully with a towel. Seon caught her wrists gently. "Are you upset with me?" "No." "Frightened?" "No." "What then?" She looked up at him, grateful, relieved, like I can finally breathe all the way down. Something broke open in his expression. He pulled her slowly toward him, waiting for resistance. There was none. She leaned into his chest and listened to his heartbeat. "Stay with me tonight," she said quietly, "just to sleep. I don't want to be alone." Seon was very still for a moment. Then he said, "Okay." He disappeared to shower and came back in dark sweatpants, his chest bare, scars visible on his skin, old ones, stories she didn't know yet. He stood at the edge of her bed. "Are you certain?" "I'm certain." He got in, slowly, stayed on his side. There was careful space between them. Tochi rolled over to face him. "You can hold me if you want to." "If I hold you, I might not want to stop." "Maybe I don't want you to stop." He reached across and his hands settled at her waist and he pulled her pulse until her back rested against his chest. His arm came around, warm and steady. "Sleep," he said close to her ear. Tochi closed her eyes. For the first time in 2 years, she felt held rather than contained. She fell asleep and didn't wake until morning. When she did, the space behind her was empty and cool. She reached back and touched it and felt something pull in her chest. Then she heard voices in the living room, raised voices. She got up and pulled on her robe. She could hear Seon before she reached the doorway. His voice was cold and flat in a way she hadn't heard since the parking garage. Another voice answered him, older, carrying the particular authority of someone used to being obeyed. She stopped where she could see through the gap. Seon was standing with his arms crossed, facing an older Korean man in an expensive suit, late 50s maybe. His face was sharp with contempt. "You are making yourself weak," the older Korean man said in careful English, "over a woman, a stranger." "Watch your mouth," Seon said quietly. "She is nobody. She is a liability to this family, a distraction from what matters. Watch your mouth." The older man spread his hands. "Look at what you're already doing, threatening people over her, bringing her into your home. Your father would not recognize you. My father is dead. I lead this family now, and my personal life is not a matter for the council. Everything you do concerns this family. Everything. You bring an outsider into our circle. You show softness. You show weakness. I'm showing that I protect what belongs to me. She does not belong to you. She is a problem. Remove her before she costs you more than she's worth, or I will remove her myself."
Seon moved. 1 second, he was across the room. The next, he had the older man's collar in his hand, pressed hard against the wall. "You will not touch her. You will not speak her name. You will not be in the same room as her if I can help it. Do you understand me, uncle?" The older man's face reddened. He pulled at Seon's grip. Seon held him there for 5 full seconds. Then he released him and stepped back. "Get out." The uncle straightened, fixed his collar. His eyes were full of something cold and calculating. "This family will not follow a man who puts sentiment before survival. Then they can try to find a better leader, see how that ends for them." The uncle left without looking back. Tochi stepped into the room. Seon turned, and when he saw her, something in his face changed entirely, softened. "How much did you hear?" "Enough." He closed his eyes. "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For making you a target, for putting you in the middle of something that isn't yours to carry." Tochi crossed the room and took his hands. "You didn't put me anywhere. You pulled me out of something. There's a difference." "He's not entirely wrong, though," Seon said. "You being here complicates things, creates vulnerability. Do you want me to leave?" "No." His hands closed around hers immediately. "No, my family will adjust, or they won't. I'm not releasing you either way." Tochi looked up at him. "Why me? You could have anyone, someone from your world, someone who understands all of this." "I don't want someone from my world. I want you." The words sat between them, plain and unadorned and completely true. "I'm nobody," Tochi said. "I'm just a girl who ran from the wrong man and grabbed onto a stranger in a parking garage." "You are not nobody." Seon cupped her face in both hands. "You survived someone who was trying to erase you, and you are still standing here with your whole self intact. That is not nothing. That is everything." He kissed her, hard and urgent, like he was trying to press the truth of it into her. Tochi kissed him back with the same force, her hands twisted into his shirt. His arms came around her waist and lifted her, and she wrapped her legs around him without thinking. He carried her to the couch and sat with her, and his hands stayed on her waist, holding without demanding, wanting without taking. Tochi pulled back. They were both breathing hard. "What are we doing?" "I don't know, but I don't want to stop. Your uncle said I'm making you weak. Your uncle is wrong. You make me want to be something better than I've been. You're already good." He shook his head. "I'm a criminal, Tochi. I have done things I can't undo. I have hurt people. I run something built on fear and on power that doesn't belong to me on paper. I am not a good man. You are good to me." Something cracked open in his expression. "That's enough," he said. "Right now, that is everything." He kissed her again, and this time there was nothing held back on either side. Much later, they lay quiet. Seon's fingers traced slow patterns on her arm. Tochi pressed her face against his neck and breathed him in. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. "Yes." "No regrets?" "None at all." His arms pulled her closer. "Good, because I'm not capable of letting you go now. So possessive." "Yes." Tochi smiled against his skin. She should have been thinking about his uncle's words, about what she was walking into, about the complications stacking around them like walls. Instead, she just breathed him in and let herself be still. The following weeks were strange and full and strange again. Seon took her places, restaurants where the menus had no prices, private rooms where men in suits stood when he entered. She saw what he was in those spaces, how people moved around him, how a look from him could silence a room or clear a path. She saw him handle a man who had stolen from him, watched the cold precision of it. It should have sent her running. Part of her understood that it should, but she also understood that the gentleness he gave her was not a performance. It was the same man. Both things were true. Both things were Seon. One evening, they were at dinner in a private dining room, just the two of them, and Seon was telling her about a property investment he was working through, something entirely legal, when the door opened. A Korean woman walked in, striking, poised, wearing the kind of quiet confidence that comes from never having doubted herself in a room. She looked at Seon with familiar eyes, comfortable eyes. "Hello, Seon." His face closed immediately. "Jian, what are you doing here?" "Dinner, same as you." Her eyes moved to Tochi. "Aren't you going to introduce your guest?" "No." The woman smiled. She pulled out the chair across from Tochi and sat down without being invited. "I'm Jian, Seon's former fiancé." Tochi felt something drop through her. Fiancé. Seon had not mentioned a fiancé. "Leave, Jian." Seon's voice was quiet and contained. "Why? So afraid I'll tell her things she should know?" "There is nothing to tell. We've been finished for 3 years. Because you ended our engagement rather than honor your family's commitment. Because you chose principle over alliance." Jian's attention settled fully on Tochi. "Did he tell you that? That we were supposed to be married? That our families built a partnership around that arrangement?" Seon said leave once more, and his voice had dropped to something very particular. Jian ignored it. She kept her eyes on Tochi. "You're lovely. I understand the distraction, but that's the sum of it for him. When this is over, he'll return to his world, to someone who can actually stand inside it with him." Tochi set down her chopsticks. She looked at Jian calmly and said, "If that's true, then why are you here?" Jian blinked. "What? If I'm just a temporary distraction that he'll outgrow and walk away from, then why are you sitting at our table trying to frighten me off? You're not worried about him. You're worried about yourself." Seon made a sound very close to a laugh. Jian's composure slipped a fraction. She stood abruptly. "You're making an error," she said to Seon. "She'll cost you everything. That's my choice to make. The family won't accept this. The family does what I tell it to do." Jian left. Tochi's heart was going fast. She looked at Seon across the table. "Ex-fiancé?" "Yes, you didn't mention her." "It didn't feel relevant. It's over since I ended it." She doesn't seem to agree. Seon reached across and took her hand. "It's over, Tochi. I ended it because I didn't love her, because I refused to let my life be arranged like a business merger, because I wanted something real. Is this real? She asked, looking at him directly. Us? Yes, this is the most real thing in my life right now. She wanted to believe that. She did believe it, but Jian's parting words had lodged somewhere. She'll cost you everything. That night, Seon held her close. Tell me what's in your head. Jian, what she said. She's trying to destabilize you. Is it working? Tochi thought about it honestly. A little. I don't want to be the reason your life falls apart. I don't want to be the reason your family turns against you. They won't, and if they try, I'll deal with it. But what if the cost is too high? No what ifs, he said. I choose you, Tochi. I keep choosing you every single day. Even if it costs you everything, you are everything. The words settled into her chest like something solid. Tochi turned in his arms and faced him. I love you. She hadn't planned it. It arrived fully formed and certain. Seon went very still. Then his eyes went soft in a way she'd never seen before. Say that again. I love you. He kissed her slowly and completely. When he pulled back, his voice was rough. I love you too. I have for weeks. I was afraid saying it would scare you off. I'm not going anywhere. Promise me? I promise. They held each other through the night, and Tochi fell asleep, feeling chosen. She woke to shouting. Seon was already out of bed, pulling on clothes. Stay here, he said. Lock the door. What's happening? I don't know. Just stay. He was gone. Tochi got up and dressed quickly. She could hear multiple voices from the other side of the door, all in Korean, urgent and overlapping. She cracked the door. The living room was full, at least a dozen men, armed. Seon stood in the center of them, and his uncle stood across from him, looking satisfied in a way that turned Tochi's stomach. You've left us no choice. The council has voted. You are removed as head of this family, effective immediately. On what grounds? Seon's voice was completely level. You have placed personal sentiment over this family's security and interests. You have shown yourself unfit to lead. Who made this decision? The council, the uncle said. Unanimous. Seon looked around at the men. Some held his gaze, others looked at the floor. And what happens now? You leave Seoul. You take your woman and go. If you remain in this city, you will be treated as a liability. A young man near the back of the room, maybe 30, met Seon's eyes. Seon, please, just go. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Seon looked at him for a moment. Then he nodded once. Fine, I'll go. The uncle smiled.
Seon came to the bedroom. Tochi was standing in the middle of the room with tears running silently down her face. I heard, she said. We need to go. Seon, I heard everything. This is because of me. He crossed to her and took her by the shoulders. This is not your fault. They were looking for a reason. I handed them one. But the reason was me. No, he shook his head. The reason is that half of them are afraid of what this family could become if led by someone with a conscience. You are not the reason. What do? We leave Seoul, go somewhere safe, think clearly, plan the next step. Where? He was already dialing. He spoke quickly in Korean. Then he pocketed the phone. I have a place in the mountains, off every map I didn't make myself. One person knows about it, someone I trust completely. They packed fast, only what mattered. Documents, cash, clothes, a few things that were irreplaceable. Seon moved with a kind of military efficiency that told her he'd prepared for exactly this possibility. When they were ready, he took her hand. Whatever comes next, we face it together. Okay. They walked through the living room. The assembled men watched them go. The uncle smiled from across the room. Seon stopped at the door and looked back. You think removing me makes this family safer. It makes it weaker. When your enemies figure that out, and they will, you will remember tonight. Get out, the uncle said. They left. Seon drove fast through the pre-dawn streets. Tochi watched the city blur and tried not to come apart. This was because of her. She knew it no matter what he said. Stop, Seon said without looking over. Stop what? Carrying this. I can see it on your face from here. I made every choice that led to tonight, Tochi. I chose you knowing the cost. I'd make the same choices again." She reached across and took his hand. He drove the rest of the way, holding it. 2 hours outside Seoul, the road narrowed and the city disappeared entirely behind mountains. The safe house was small and simple, and set back from a road that wasn't on any standard map. Clean floors, a small kitchen, 1 bedroom, a couch, a television, firewood stacked by the door. It wasn't much. It was private and quiet and untraceable. "We're safe here," Sion said, "for now. What happens next? We wait, we think, we make a plan." "Do you have one?" Sion's mouth curved. "I always have one." On the 3rd night, there was a knock at the door. Sion was still before the second knock fell. He moved to the window, looked out, then unlocked the door. The young man from the apartment walked in. "Hang," Sion said. "What are you doing here?" "I came to warn you." Sion waited. "Your uncle isn't satisfied with exile," Hang said. "He's sending men tomorrow, 6 at minimum. He wants this finished permanently. He's afraid you'll come back and challenge him." "Who's leading them?" Hang hesitated. "Song-woo." Sion's jaw tightened. "And there's something else." He looked at Tochi. "Your ex, Marcus. He went to Sion's uncle, offered information about properties, contacts, places Sion might go. He wants revenge. He's helping them search." The blood drained from Tochi's face. "Marcus? Does he know about this place?" Hang shook his head. "No, but he knows enough about Sion's patterns to help them narrow it down." Sion put a hand on Hang's shoulder. "Thank you. Now go before you're missed." Hang nodded but didn't move immediately. "Half the family thinks my father was wrong," Hang said. "They won't say it, but they think it. The younger ones especially." Sion looked at him steadily. "Your father?" Hang's chin lifted slightly. "He's my uncle. I thought you knew." Sion shook his head slowly. "Go," he said. "Be careful." Hang left. Sion was already moving when the door closed. "We have to go tonight." Tochi helped him pack again. Her hands were shaking. "Sion," she said, "this is still because of me. Marcus is out there feeding information to your enemies because he's angry I left him. If I hadn't—" He crossed to her and took her face in his hands. "Stop. You listen to me. You did the bravest thing a person can do. You ran. You chose your life over your fear. Everything that followed from that is on Marcus and on my uncle, not on you. You woke something up in me, Tochi. You made me want a life I was actually living, not managing, not performing, living. I would walk through everything that has happened again to get to this. Do you hear me?" She nodded. He kissed her, quick and fierce. "Now let's go." They drove through the night, back roads and no highway. 3 hours later, Sion pulled into a car park of a small motel that looked like it had never been reviewed anywhere online. He paid with cash and they took the room at the far end. Tochi sat on the edge of the bed while Sion checked the locks and windows and mapped the exits. When he sat down next to her, he said, "I'm going back to Seoul." Tochi's heart stopped completely. "No, listen to me. If I don't end this, it will follow us forever. My uncle will send more men. Marcus will keep feeding information. We will spend our lives running from something I could finish now. So you're going back alone to face a man who just had you exiled and who is sending armed people to find you? I'm going to end this the right way. Sion, I am not going to die. I need you here and safe so that I can focus. If I'm worrying about you, I can't think clearly." "When?" "Tomorrow. I'll leave at first light." Tochi looked at him for a long time. Then she nodded once, very slowly, because she could see it was already decided, and because she understood, even through the terror, that this was who he was. They spent the night close. She memorized everything. The sound of his voice, the weight of his arm across her, the way he said her name. In the morning, he dressed and armed himself and kissed her once before he left, long and careful, like he wanted it to last. He gave her a phone with one number in it. "Jay, if anything comes to the door before I call you, you call this number immediately." "Sion." "I love you, Tochi." He was already walking. "I love you," she called after him. He lifted one hand without turning around. and then he was gone. Tochi sat by the window and waited. The day passed like something pulling itself apart slowly. She didn't eat. She moved from the window to the bed to the window again. The phone Sion had given her stayed silent. The second morning, she was still awake when the phone rang. Tochi grabbed it. "Hello?" It was Hang. His voice was stretched thin. "Tochi, you need to come to Seoul. The hospital. Sion is—" The phone nearly fell from her hand. She caught it. She didn't remember getting in a car, didn't remember the roads, didn't remember parking. She remembered running through a hospital corridor following signs, and then Hang's face outside a room and her own hands pushing the door open. Sion was in the bed. Bandages across his ribs, bruising along his jaw, a cut above his eyebrow that had been closed with tape. He looked terrible, and when she came through the door, Sion looked at her and the relief on his face was complete and uncomplicated. "You came." She crossed the room and took his hand and held it in both of hers. She was crying now, finally, everything that had been locked up for days coming through at once. "What happened? I need you to tell me everything." Sion squeezed her hands. It went mostly as planned. Mostly. He rested. His uncle had accepted the formal challenge, confident that exile had softened him. He had been wrong. Song-woo had tried to intervene, and hadn't made it out of that room. And Marcus? Sion's expression grew cold for a moment. Marcus was given a choice: leave Korea permanently and never contact Tochi again, or face a complete accounting of his visa fraud, his workplace misconduct, and the documented assault charges she could support with evidence Sion's people had already gathered and delivered to the right authorities. Marcus had tried to fight it. He was in police custody now and would not be leaving it anytime soon.
"And your uncle?" Tochi asked. Sion was quiet. Then he said, "He made his choice too. Hang leads the family now. He's young, but he's not his father. He'll lead it differently, better. And I am out, completely and officially, free." "You gave it all up," Tochi said. Sion looked at her steadily. "I gave up nothing. I have everything I want in this room right now." She leaned down carefully, mindful of the bandages, and kissed him. He kissed her back like a man who had come a long way to get back to something. "Don't ever do that to me again," she said against his mouth. "I'll try my best. That's the most honest promise I can make." Recovery was slow, and Sion was a difficult patient. He resisted the hospital, resisted the restrictions, pushed against every limitation they put on him, until Tochi sat next to him and said, "If you pull out that drip one more time, I will leave this room and not come back." He left the drip alone after that. She brought him food and read to him, and held his hand when the pain came hard at night, and refused to apologize for any of it. Hang came often, uncertain and earnest, asking for guidance with the careful deference of someone who knew they had stepped into something much larger than themselves. Sion gave it freely, generously, without resentment. "You're good at this," Tochi told him one evening after Hang had left. "Teaching. You're clear, patient. Maybe that's what you do with what comes next." Sion looked at her. "You think so? I think you have things to give that don't require anyone to be afraid of you first." He considered that. "Or I open a restaurant." Tochi laughed. "What? I like food. I like watching you cook. Nigerian and Korean, right here in Seoul. There's nobody doing that well." "You're serious?" He tilted his head. "We could be." Tochi laughed again, and it felt like something that had been wound very tight for a very long time, finally loosening. 6 weeks later, Sion came home from the hospital, back to the apartment with the floor-to-ceiling windows and the city below. It felt like returning to a beginning. Tochi had her visa sorted, her enrollment confirmed, her first semester of lectures starting in March. Sion had, against all visible logic, registered a small commercial kitchen space 3 streets away. One afternoon, about 3 months after everything, they were sitting on the couch. Tochi was reading, Sion was watching her with the focused patience of someone who never got tired of a particular view. She looked up. "What?" "Marry me." Tochi put the book down. "What?" Sion shifted to face her. "Marry me, Tochi.
I want to build an actual life with you, not a temporary arrangement, not a safe house, not waiting for the next thing to go wrong. I want mornings and dinners and arguments about nothing and everything, with you, for as long as we have." She looked at this man, this careful, dangerous, gentle man who had stood between her and Marcus without being asked, who had held her in a parking garage and asked for nothing and given everything, who had lost his family's empire and called it freedom because she was on the other side of it. "You want to marry me," she said. "Yes. Even though I'm just a graduate student who grabbed you in a parking garage? You are not just anything. You never were. What about your family? Your family doesn't have a vote anymore. This is mine to decide. Ours. Will you?" "Yes." The word came out before she'd finished deciding, and she knew that was exactly right. "Yes, I'll marry you." Sion smiled, a full, real, unguarded smile. He pulled her into his arms and held her, and neither of them needed to say anything else for a long time. They married quietly, small, intentional, just Hang and a handful of people Sion trusted with his actual life. Tochi's family couldn't come, but she video called them, and her mother cried, and her sister demanded to inspect Sion immediately, and her father asked only one question: "Does he treat you well?" Tochi looked at Sion across the room and said, "He treats me like I matter." Her father said that's the only thing that counts. The restaurant opened 4 months later, small space, warm lighting, a menu that put jollof rice next to bibimbap and egusi beside doenjang jjigae. It shouldn't have worked on paper, it worked completely in practice. Tochi cooked, Sion managed and learned and burned things regularly until she installed him on front of house instead. They worked hard hours and they built it themselves, and it was theirs in a way nothing had ever been. Some evenings after close, they'd sit in the empty dining room with the chairs still upturned on some of the tables and the city quiet outside, and just talk about everything, about nothing, about what came next. "Do you miss it?" Tochi asked one such night. "The power, the position, all of it." Sion was quiet for long enough that she thought he might say yes. Then he said, "Sometimes I miss the certainty of it, knowing what my role was. But then I look at this, at you, at what we've built, at the fact that I wake up every morning choosing this life instead of inheriting it. And no, I don't miss it at all. This is better, much better, because this is actually mine." Tochi leaned into him. "I love you. I love you too," he said. "Thank you for running to me that night, for trusting me when you had no reason to, for not letting go. Thank you for not walking away, for holding on, for making me feel like I was worth protecting. Always." He pressed his lips to her hair. "Always." They sat together in the quiet of the restaurant they had built from almost nothing, two people who had found each other in the darkest corner of a parking garage and decided, separately and then together, to hold on. It wasn't a perfect life, but it was a chosen one, and sometimes that is the most extraordinary thing a life can be. If this story moved you, if you felt every moment of Tochi and Sion's journey in your chest, hit that like button right now. Share it with someone who needs to hear that it's okay to run, that it's okay to grab onto something solid in the dark. And leave a comment below telling me where in the world you're watching from tonight. I read every single one.